Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
She was really pretty, so pretty that it made men feel dizzy. Her beauty wasn't like what we imagine angels to look like, but it was like something out of this world. Some might even say it was devilishly beautiful, as if the devil himself had given her that beauty to use on earth. He loved her a lot, so much that his love had no limits. It brought him happiness but also pain, almost like a punishment from heaven for his mistakes. She was unpredictable and sometimes unreasonable, like many women are. He was superstitious and brave, like many men of his time. Her name was Maria Antunes, and his name was Pedro Alfonso de Orellana. They both came from Toledo, where they were born and raised. The story about them happened a long time ago, and the tale doesn't say much more about them. I won't add any extra details to their story. One day, Pedro found Maria crying and asked her why she was sad. She wiped her tears, looked at him, sighed, and started crying again. Pedro came closer, held her hand, and leaned on the edge of the wall where Maria was looking at the river. He asked her again why she was crying. The river, called Tahoe, was flowing below the tower where they stood. The sun was setting behind the mountains, and the afternoon was quiet except for the sound of the water. Maria said, "Please don't ask me why I'm crying. I wouldn't know how to explain it, and you wouldn't understand. Women have feelings and thoughts that we can't always put into words. Sometimes we have strange ideas that we keep to ourselves because we're afraid. Please don't ask me about my sadness. If I told you, you might just laugh at me." After saying this, she bowed her head again, and Pedro kept asking her why she was sad. Maria, after staying quiet for a while, finally spoke to Pedro in a shaky voice. "You really want to know, huh? Okay. I'll tell you, even though it's silly and might make you laugh. So, yesterday I was at the church for Virgin Mary's special celebration. Her statue was on a fancy stand above the main altar, shining brightly. The organ music filled the whole church, and the priests were singing. I was praying, really focused, when suddenly I looked up and my eyes landed on something strange. It wasn't the statue. It was a golden bracelet on the arm of the statue where her son sits. I tried to look away and pray again, but I couldn't. My eyes kept going back to the bracelet. The lights in the church made the diamonds on the bracelet sparkle like crazy. It looked like millions of tiny stars swirling around. I left the church, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't sleep all night. Even in my dreams, I saw a woman wearing the same bracelet, teasing me about it. She said it would never be mine, no matter what. It's like this idea got stuck in my head, and I can't shake it off. It feels like something the devil himself put in my mind. So, what do you think? Does my craziness make you laugh?" Pedro, gripping his sword tightly, lifted his head and said quietly, "Which virgin has this bracelet?" "The Virgin of the Sagrario," whispered Maria. "The Virgin of the Sagrario," repeated Pedro, sounding scared. "The Virgin of the Sagrario from the cathedral." Pedro's face showed how shocked he was by the idea. "Why couldn't some other virgin have it?" he said, sounding tense and passionate. "Why couldn't the archbishop wear it on his hat? Or the king in his crown? Or even the devil in his claws? I'd take it from them for you, even if it meant risking death or hell. But taking it from the Virgin of the Sagrario, our own patron saint, I who was born in Toledo, it's just impossible. Impossible. Never." Maria whispered, barely audible. "Never." And she started crying again. Pedro stared blankly at the flowing river below, lost in thought, with the city of Toledo sitting on the rocks in the background. Think of the cathedral in Toledo like a huge forest made of stone trees. They're so big that they form a gigantic arch where all sorts of imaginary and real beings live. Picture a mix of shadows and light inside, where the colorful light from the windows mixes with the darkness. It's a world of stone that's as big as the spirit of our religion, and as mysterious as its stories. But even if you imagine all this, you still won't grasp how amazing this cathedral is. It's a timeless monument that shows how much our ancestors loved their religion, filled with treasures of knowledge, inspiration, and art. Inside the cathedral, there's silence, majesty, and a sense of mystery that keeps out worldly thoughts and distractions. Breathing the air here feels like breathing pure mountain air, and it could even cure someone of not believing in God. But the cathedral is most impressive during religious celebrations. That's when it's covered in gold and jewels, with fancy carpets on the floors and beautiful tapestries on the pillars. The 1,000 silver lamps light up, incense fills the air, and the choir's voices, the organs, and the bells make the whole building shake with their music. It's in moments like these that we can truly feel the greatness of God, who fills the cathedral with his glory. On the same day as the big celebration we talked about earlier, when the festival for Virgin Mary was ending, the cathedral was almost empty. The big crowd of people who came to celebrate had already left, and the lights inside were turned off. The heavy doors closed behind the last person leaving the church. In the quiet darkness, a man emerged from the shadows. He looked pale like the stone statues in the cathedral. He walked quietly toward the central chapel, where a lamp gave a little light. It was Pedro. Nobody knows what happened between Pedro and Maria that led him to do something so scary. But there he was, with a clear intention to do something wrong. He looked around nervously, sweating, his thoughts showing on his face. The cathedral was silent, very silent. Sometimes there were strange noises, like creaks or whispers in the wind. Maybe it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. But Pedro didn't stop. He reached the chapel and stepped closer to the altar. The chapel was full of tombs of important people, with their stone statues looking like they were guarding the place. "Keep going," Pedro whispered to himself, trying to move forward, but he couldn't. Felt like his feet were stuck to the floor. He looked down and saw dark burial stones all around him. For a moment, he thought he felt a cold, ghostly hand holding him in place. The dim lights in the cathedral seemed to flicker, and everything around him looked like it was moving. "Keep going," Pedro said again, feeling like he was losing his mind. He climbed onto the altar and reached for the golden bracelet. The whole place seemed even scarier now, with weird shadows and flickering lights. Only the statue of the Virgin Mary, softly lit by a lamp, looked peaceful in the chaos. But even her calm smile filled Pedro with fear. He closed his eyes tightly, grabbed the bracelet, and pulled it off. It was a valuable treasure, but he didn't feel happy. He just wanted to run away. But to do that, he had to open his eyes, and he was too scared to see what was around him. Finally, he opened his eyes and saw something terrifying. The cathedral was filled with statues, all looking at him with empty eyes. Saints, angels, and even demons seemed to surround him. Everything felt surreal and frightening. Pedro couldn't handle it anymore. He screamed and passed out on the altar. The next morning, when the church workers found him, he was still holding the bracelet and laughing like a madman. He had lost his mind.